Oh. So hi everyone, welcome to a webinar where we'll talk about ISAC and federal updates. Um, my name is Manuel Talavera. I go by Manny. I'm a professional development specialist here at ISAC. I do have a few housekeeping items before I get over the content of the presentation. So before we begin, this presentation is being recorded and we share them on our website. We usually put them up within 1 or 2 weeks after the webinar. If you are having trouble hearing me, connecting through audio, you can use the Call Me feature. So if you hover your mouse cursor over the mute button, you'll see an audio options button where you can have WebEx dial you. We also have some of my colleagues joining us as panelists. As attendees, if this is your first time attending a WebEx webinar, you won't have access to camera or audio. So the only way you ask questions will be the Q&A. And of course, you can take our contact information down at the end of the presentation and you can reach out to us. But please use Q&A. We have my colleagues up here ready to answer questions. And you can also view our upcoming webinars on our schedule, where we have our schedule for the fall, where we have PACE and other financial aid trainings as well. And we are also offering continuing education and professional development hours. So if you need those, please wait towards the end of the presentation where we will send out the link for that. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So for those who aren't familiar with ISAC, we're the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. We're the state's largest one-stop resource for financial aid information. And our mission is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make college or education beyond high school more accessible and affordable. We administer scholarships and grants like the Monetary Award Program, the MAP Grant, which is one of the largest grant programs of its kind in the country. In our division of college access and outreach, we provide professional development opportunities on helping professionals work better with students and helping them navigate the college and financial aid application process, resources for assisting underrepresented students, and navigating the repayment forgiveness programs as well, just to name a few. So with that, this is the agenda of our presentation. I have a sort of program updates, as well as some general updates from ISAC, some federal updates, as well as some FAFSA updates, and some resources as well. And keep in mind, while each section, each slide can be its own presentation, I'm doing a very quick overview because for some of you, maybe the first time hearing about an ISAC program. So I'm gonna do a very brief overview. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A. But I wanted to do an overview to kind of see where things are right now with that program. So first is the alternative application, Alt app or alternative app. You may hear me use any one of those interchangeably. So the 24-25 application is still available for the maximum award is $8,400. The priority deadline for returning MAP recipients was moved from February 1 to April 1st. And keep in mind, we have to have a priority deadline. It is not a hard deadline. And you'll see many of our programs have a consideration date or a priority consideration date. And all that means if you get your application by this specific date, because the MAP grant is funded by an appropriation, meaning funds can run out, it gives priority access to students who have already received the MAP. We did have a MAP suspense date this year, and it's been the first that I've seen in the last 3-4 years. But we did make a suspension of 24-25 MAP grants, whether you file a FAFSA or an alternative application if your application was received on or after August 21st. So if you submitted your first time application before then students are fine, right? But even with that, when you see a priority deadline and it's say April 2nd and you're working with the student who's filling out the FAFSA for the first time, definitely still encourage them to do so, right? And in terms of 25-26, that application will be available December 1. For those who don't know, a bit of a spoiler alert, even though I'm not going over FAFSA updates, we're going to hear December 1 lots of times. I know last year, if you attended some of our webinars, we were like, oh yeah, October 1, FAFSA is going to go back, 25, 26 is going to go back to October 1. We know that that's not the case. So they committed to a Department of Education committed to a date, and so ISAC tries to mirror that date, right? To not cause any kind of confusion out in the financial aid world. So first we have, and by the way, some of these programs have very long names, right? And in some cases, we're still working to develop acronyms for them. And for those who are veterans of the financial aid space, we know that there are tons of acronyms out there to learn. So first we have ECACE or ECACE, but it's the Early Childhood Access Consortium for Equity Scholarship Program. And so some quick updates for this program is that now it's funded by the state of Illinois rather than the federal government. And it has large implications for qualifying and documented students. So many of our programs can determine awards based off financial need. And a way to do that is by submitting either the FAFSA if you're eligible for, or the alternative application if you're not eligible to submit a FAFSA. And that's for qualifying and documented students only. That to help determine the priority access to some of these scholarship programs. And so now it's opened up the doors for those students. Now the maximum award amount has changed. So now it's 7,500. The ECAC program is known as a last payer program in the financial aid world. What that means is once you submit a FAFSA, you see you're Pell eligible and MAP eligible, all that gets applied first. And if there's any remaining need, then you can dip into ECA's funds. And keep in mind that when a financial aid administrator and FAA is looking and packaging a financial aid offer to the student, they can't over award them, meaning they can't receive more money than what they're eligible for. So even a student can receive up to 7,500, but if they were to receive that full amount and it would cause an over award, right? This is where school can tap into and say, okay, well, we were going to give you 7,500, but you only need $5,000 to cover your cost of attendance, so we're only going to award you 5,000, right? And last year, graduate students were able to apply for ECAs. Now that's no longer the case. So this is only for students seeking an undergraduate degree, whether it's an advancement for an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, etc. And ECAs is intended for those who are currently working or who have worked in the early education field. So specifically those who work in that arena. And it can no longer be used for the summer. So it can only be used for fall, winter, and spring terms or semesters if you're looking at fall and spring semesters. The 24-25 application is no longer available. The priority deadline was August 11, 2024. In each one of these slides, I have the link of where you can find more information about the specific program. And then we have the Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship. So that's MTI. So that maximum award, based off the appropriation levels we received, is up to 7,500. The 24-25 priority consideration date was March 31st of 2024. ISAC is continuing to accept application as long as it's submitted and all the information is there. And if funds remain available, then ISAC can continue to award funds for that. So hence why the application is still available and we're still accepting applications for that. So some updates as a reminder for some of our folks who are coming from an institution is that each institution that participates in the MTA program, they have to host an annual information session about the program for teacher candidates of color. And so the MTI program encourages academically talented minority students, like African American students, Hispanic students, Native American students, Asian students, to pursue careers as teachers. And would also, these institutions should help to facilitate completion of each student's educator preparation program with these info sessions to help encourage enrollment. And if they know they're receiving students or they have students enrolled who are receiving MTI, that they help them matriculate, help them graduate to receive their degree. And keep in mind, while it's not on this slide, we have it towards the end of our section. I've kind of grouped them into our teaching programs first. So it's the easiest group to put together is that there are teaching requirements with them, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. And then we have the special education teacher tuition waiver program. And so SETTW is to help students pursue careers in the area of special education. So these are waivers at that you can use at any of the public four-year institutions in Illinois. And while I didn't mention with MTI, there's a broader list of schools that you can use. That information's on our website. Versus SETTW can only be used at our public institutions, the 12 of them. So only awards up to 250 waivers. The application is no longer available. All those awards have been, all those waivers have been awarded. That priority deadline was March 1st. And we anticipate that the 25-26 application will be available in December of 2024. And the same goes with MTI. Typically, the application becomes available in December. I just wanted to point that out there. Then we have Golden Apple Scholars. So while ISAC doesn't handle the application cycle of the program, we handle the financial side. Meaning the school submits claims on behalf of the student, and ISAC pays out those claims. So a student with Golden Apple, which encourages students in Illinois to pursue teaching careers, so another teaching program. And what's different about this one is that it awards up to $23,000 in financial assistance spread out throughout the student's tenure in college. It's open to high school seniors, Illinois partner, university freshman or sophomore, or an Illinois community college student. There is a sort of application cycle that's currently open. Priority deadline is coming up December 1, 2024. And there's different deadlines depending on the group that you're in. So current students in community college can apply, or if you're currently in college, you can apply. You have until March 1st. But for general high school seniors, that deadline is April 1st, 2025. There's also a Golden Apple Accelerators program that for those who are currently already working professionally and you want to become a teacher, there's assistance programs for that as well. More information in the goldenapple.org website. So a quick overview of the programs that we've discussed, right? We had ECAC, MTI, SETTW, and Golden Apple. It's sort of a lot to keep track of. So we have a comparison chart where we talk about each of those programs. So what I recommend is going on our website and printing out that chart and having it in your office so that you can always see. And if you're working with students who are considering working in the education field, you can talk to them about those programs, right? But it's something to keep in mind. So all these programs can be used with the MAP grant, right? But with the MAP grant, that's only applied to tuition and fees. And oftentimes the MAP grant is applied first. So you can have some instances with like the SETTW. In that case, it's a tuition waiver. So the SETTW is applied, right? But in other instances, whatever remaining need can be covered with, say, like MTI or even Golden Apple. Now, if a student is eligible for all three in the same award year, SETTW, MTI, or Golden Apple, notice that ECACE is not on this specific list, right? I'll talk about it towards the end of the slide. The student can choose which of those programs they want to use. So ISAC will identify those students, or what I'd recommend is the student to reach out to the financial aid office to give them the loop if they haven't already. Maybe a student has already applied to them, so ISAC keeps track and sees that information through Gap Access. So we'll send a letter to that student, letting them know which program they would like to use benefits from and a specific deadline of when we want to hear back from them to let us know, right? Because a student can't receive SETTW, MTI, and Golden Apple benefits within the same term, right? However, with ECACE, and it's been the same in prior years, that it can be used in combination with SETTW, MTI, and Golden Apple. However, ECACE is a last payer. So whatever gets applied first, if there's any remaining need, they can dip into those funds from ECAC. Now let's talk about the teaching obligations. And notice that ECAC is not on here. We'll talk about that towards the end of the slide. So for SETTW, Golden Apple Scholars, and MTI, there is a specific teaching requirement that they have to meet. SETTW is requiring a 2-year teaching commitment within 5 years. Golden Apple Scholars requires a 5-year teaching commitment. MTI, for every year that you receive MTI, you do have to teach, right? For each year you receive that scholarship. And ECAC is not on here because even though there is a requirement that those who receive funds from ECAs are required to return to teaching in the field that they're receiving the funds for, right, in early education, there's no stipulation that if they don't, that grant gets converted into a loan, right? But in these situations with SETTW, Golden Apple Scholars, and MTI, if those teaching requirements are not met, that award becomes converted into a loan with interest, right? So it's really important that if you're working with students and they really want to become teachers or they're interested in becoming teachers, to just let them know, right? Because if they receive funds for that, right, they will have to pay those back if they don't meet the teaching requirement. And of course, there's ways working with ISAC if there's a situation that happens, if maybe there's an instance where the student can't work or struggling to find employment in certain areas, right? In any situation like that, have the student work with ISAC so that ISAC knows, so that there isn't any miscommunication in that piece. And then we have the Nursing Education Scholarship Program. The 24-25 application is no longer available. And so for those who are new to the program, this program provides assistance to those who are pursuing at least a certificate, some kind of credential in the field of nursing. And of course, there are various types of credentials you can receive in this field. And so hence why we took a screenshot from the website where we talk about the funding levels, because that will vary by the degree that you are seeking. But anyway, so this is for students, and there's a priority access for those who demonstrate the greatest financial needs. So a FAFSA or alternative application is required with this application. The application period runs from March 1 through April 30th. So it's a very tight timetable. So if you're working with any students who are interested, let them know, right, for next year coming up in March. And keep in mind, if a job commitment is not fulfilled, the grant converts to a loan with interest. And as I mentioned earlier, the awards do amount by the degree. So for example, if you're pursuing a certificate or an associate's degree, the maximum award that you can receive in the year is $9,023. Versus if you are seeking a associate degree in nursing at a 2-year private or 4-year community, 4-year college or university, or a bachelor's degree and above, because you can also use this in graduate school as well. It's $18,204, right? And then we have the Illinois Veterans Grant and the Illinois National Guard Grant. So not much programmatic updates for that, with the exception for some institutions. So ISAC has received money for the first time since fiscal year 2012. Almost 13 years, right? Because we're in fiscal year 25 at this point. But in 13 years, ISAC has received money for the first time to reimburse public universities and community colleges for IVG and ING. So a big thing to highlight with this program is that these are for students who are veterans, right? And these programs, they both provide tuition and mandatory fee waivers to undergraduate and graduate students who are pursuing a degree in an Illinois public institution, whether it's a 2-year or a 4-year. So these are only to be used in public institutions. Both are entitlements. So in years prior, when these programs weren't funded, the institutions were taking in that cost, right? Because when you receive a program as an entitlement, you will receive it. It's exactly what an entitlement means. You will receive it regardless of funding. Now you can have some students who, as I mentioned, this is specifically for the student. So this is a benefit that cannot get passed down to a student. So if I'm a veteran and my student is currently enrolled in high school and is graduating, I cannot pass those IVG or ING benefits to my child, right? There are some benefits that can at the federal level, but at the state level, eligibility is based on the student. So I have to be the veteran, not my child. So in that case, I can perhaps meet both eligibility requirements for IVG and ING. In that, I recommend that the student work with the financial aid office to determine which one is sort of best. And that's going to depend on the goals, academic goals of the student. And they can help kind of map out what they plan to do or they hope to do with this program. That way, they're not exhausting funds because you can also use MAP grants as well. That way, you're not exhausting funds from other sources that you can still use. Um, and then we have still using the future. I just want to finish my thought. Realize I just didn't finish my thought and moved on. And then we have the Illinois Graduate and Retain Our Workforce Tech Scholarship Program, not our longest title scholarship. We call it iGrow. So, couple updates for iGrow. So, this scholarship is for students who are pursuing IT careers and related fields, or computer science degrees. Um, so, the 24-25 application is still available. The priority consideration date is coming up November 30th of 2024. So, in about a month, or a little bit over a month, I should say. So, the program was designed to recruit and retain individuals who work in technology fields and have high demand for new employees. It awards up to $7,500 for tuition and fees, with room and board costs included as well, at Illinois public universities. And so a student here either has to submit a FAFSA or an alternative application as well, as part of the application requirement. And students also sign a master promissory note, so similar to NES, SCTTW, MTI, but this one's specifically related to their field. So if you receive money and from this scholarship, and you don't work in a related field in IT, then that grant can be converted into a loan. So in situations like this, again, always work with ISAC. Keep them in the loop. This is probably our longest title. We have the Postmaster of Social Work, School Social Work Professional Educator License Scholarship Program. And internally, this is what we use to talk about this program, Social Work, SWSP, Social Work Scholarship Program. So the 24-25 application is still available. And for those who are new to this scholarship, it provides scholarship assistance to licensed social workers with a master's degree in social work who wish to obtain a Illinois professional educator license with an endorsement in school social work. So this covers tuition and mandatory fees at each of the Illinois public universities, and no more than 250 waivers can be applied each year, or not waivers, but scholarships. And there's also a job commitment requirement that if it's not met, that grant converts into a loan with interest. And then we have the grant programs for dependents of police, fire, and correctional officers. So if a correctional officer is employed, say whether it's Department of Corrections in a security position, Illinois police officer or firefighter, and they sustain injuries on the job with at least 90% disabled, or they were killed in the line of duty, the officer's spouse or child may receive grant assistance under this program. And so the application period runs in a cycle. So the 24-25 application is no longer available. To apply for the full year consideration, that date was October 1 of 2024. To apply for just the semester, it will be March 1 for the spring semester, I should say. And then the deadline to apply for just the summer term is June 15th. And then we have a list of ISAC approved colleges where you can use PFC funds at. And then we have the Displaced Energy Worker Dependent Transition Scholarship. So this is one of the programs that has been around at ISAC for a few years. But it's only received funding in the last 2. But this scholarship provides assistance to children of eligible displaced energy workers. So an energy worker, someone who's lost employment due to reduced operation or closure of a fossil fuel power plant or a coal mine. This pays tuition and mandatory fees at public colleges and universities in Illinois. And the application deadline is based on when you wish to receive those funds, similar to the police, fire, and correctional officer scholarship. So October 1 was for first year term or full year consideration. March 1, 2025 will be for the second semester or summer term. And then June 15th will just be the summer term consideration only. So more information can be found on our website for this grant. And we also have many different types of loan repayment and forgiveness programs, such as the community behavioral healthcare professional loan repayment program. We have the human resource professional loan repayment program, the Illinois Teachers Loan Repayment Program, the John R. Justice Student Loan Repayment Program, the Nurse Educator Loan Repayment Program, the School and Municipal Social Work Shortage Loan Repayment Program, and Veterans Home Medical Providers Loan Repayment Program. So all those programs are working and running as usual. We have a link on here below where you can find more information on our website as to what are the requirements for these, and many of them will have some very kind of niche requirements related to the field in which you're in. I just wanted to give that heads up. So then I have that does it for the ISAC program updates. And next I do want to do some general updates. Do want to check do a quick temperature check of how the questions are coming along. Okay, good. I like to see folks use the Q&A. So with ISAC general updates, so this is our current fiscal year, and I want to do a quick highlight because public institutions received a 2% increase, which is $30.6 million. There was a $10 million increase to the MAP grant, so the total appropriation for the MAP is over $710 million, which puts our maximum award at $8,400. The Early Childhood Access Consortium for Equity Scholarship that we talked about earlier, that's mentioned now, it's state funded, is only $5 million, but it's great to have that program funded. And we have the Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship at $8 million, the Human Services Professional Loan Repayment Program, so that one received funding. And then, as I talked about, IBG and ING receiving funding for the first time since fiscal year 2012. So when it comes to establishing residency for Illinois programs, right? When it comes for FAFSA purposes, I like to say for the FAFSA, you're either, and the same goes for alternative application, you're either a dependent or independent student. So if you're a dependent student, you have to provide information on your parents. If you're an independent student, you don't. You can have some students who is in a situation where technically they're a dependent because they couldn't answer yes to any of the dependency questions or the personal circumstances questions, but they have an unusual circumstance. So in a situation like that, we'll talk about professional judgment later on in this presentation. That's where you want a student to be seeking, right? Because they are able to submit a FAFSA as a provisional independent student. But anyway, I like to provide that context. What's new for dependent students is you can have an instance in which, because of FAFSA simplification, where you can have an instance in which, because the rule is, if your parent reported on the FAFSA, they have to physically reside in Illinois and make Illinois their fixed and permanent home. But you can have an instance in which one parent you're living with, say, for example, they separated. So we'll use me, for example. So say I'm living with my mom is not working, but my dad, who lives in Indiana, is working and is providing support to my mom. So the contributor for the FAFSA will be my dad, right, who lives in Indiana, which then my reporting parent that could make me an Indiana resident, right, for financial aid purposes, well, looking at MAP residency requirements, right, for that purpose. So the institution can now review an applicant residency eligibility and make a residency override on a case-by-case basis when a dependent student physically resides with the parent in Illinois, but the parent contributor listed on the FAFSA physically resides in another state. So this will allow the student to be considered an Illinois resident and be considered for the MAP grant, for example. So in a situation like that, where even though my mom isn't working, dad is supporting us, dad lives in Indiana, I can still be considered an Illinois resident for financial aid purposes so that I can be considered for the MAP grant, institutional scholarships at state schools, etc. Right. So it's very important we talk about that. Some other updates. So the 25-26 MAP start formula was approved. And what that means is basically business will continue as usual. The MAP grant will most likely still be at 8,400 for the maximum award because it's looking at some formulas that we look at when calculating the funding mechanism. We're using fiscal year or the academic year 21-22 reported tuition and fees, 21-22 Pell schedule payment, 5,200 living allowance. So all that is used in the formula when it comes to calculating for a MAP grant. And I know we left out some scholarships and grants, right? But if you would like to see the full list, I have them on here where you can see what other sorts of programs and initiatives that we do. And really, when I say we're the state's largest one-stop resource for financial aid information, and it's in part because we administer a vast majority of the scholarship programs within the state. So next, I'm going to go over some federal updates before I talk about some FAFSA updates. So all encompass the federal updates like PSLF updates or repayment updates, those sorts of things. So first we have public service loan forgiveness. That's PSLF. So for those who are unfamiliar with PSLF and you work for a nonprofit organization, 501c3, or a government agency, federal, state, local, this is for you. Or for those who are thinking about it, this is also for you. So you might be eligible for PSLF if you make 120 eligible payments while under a qualifying repayment plan while employed by a government or not-for-profit organization, so a qualifying employer. And as I mentioned, government includes tribal, federal, state, local. If you work for a school district, or you work for a school, right, that counts as government, right? That will count, right? And you do have to work and make payments, 10 years worth of payments, right? So they don't have to be consecutive. So if you want to work a little bit in the public in the private sector, you can, right? The easiest way to apply is the PSLF help tool. And if you ask any one of my colleagues up here in the panel, who has at least been here since 2019, can attest to how different the process has been. I've applied since 2015 and it has become much more streamlined and digital and just much better. I do have a tip though. If you have applied, because you don't necessarily have to apply every year, but we recommend that you do so you can help keep track of your payments, right? In the past, Fed Loan Servicing was managing PSLF, and then it became MOHELA, and now it's going back to the federal government. So if you were in a MOHELA and bouncing around creating accounts, it's back to studentaid.gov, or the financial, I can't recall the name of it off the top of my head, but the servicer for it. So all that information is posted on there will help you keep track of your payments. And it helps you to confirm that you're on track for forgiveness. So some updates. So there have been significant program improvements that I talked about. The PSLF help tool, which helps determine whether your employment qualifies or if you need to input your employer on there. Definitely, if you're switching employers and you're in with PSLF, that's when you should really update your information so that, again, all the up-to-date information is there. And we get this question a lot. Who should I submit? Because now you can send a digital version of the application for a signature to anyone in your agency, right? Don't send it to your executive director or CEO, right? Send it to someone in human resources that can verify your employment dates. That's all they do to verify, like, yes, this individual worked for us from these dates, or these individuals is still working for us, but we're verifying these dates that he's applying for so you can get credit for those programs, for those payment dates. So there's been over 1 million borrowers receiving forgiveness, totaling over $175 billion worth of student debt relief, right? And prior to Biden and Harris administration, the PSLF rejection rate was as high as a 98%. Right? Some of you have applied for PSLF during the limited waiver period because they were extremely generous, and some of those changes continue on because of looking at the program and some gaps within that program. So to tighten those up as much as possible and really get credit for those who have been in repayment for a long time to get them closer to forgiveness, especially if they're working for a qualifying employer. And many individuals, or even some at ISAC, some of my colleagues who receive forgiveness based upon the limited waiver period, even though they've been repayment 15 years, 16 years, you name it. So Department of Education, which we're going to call ED or department, right? But I just want to put that acronym out there. They're also doing an outreach campaign where they're reaching out to governors and mayors across the country to encourage state and public service employees to take advantage of the PSLF program. It's been around since 2007, right? And serves a good cause. So if you are in the field, definitely take advantage of it. Some of you who are working for universities, public institutions, or non-for-profit institutions, they're qualifying employers, right? And even if you apply now and you haven't applied, but you've been working for 5 years already and you've made those 5 years worth of payments, and even though COVID payments, the COVID forbearance payments count, you'll get credit for those, right? I've known people who started working and their repayment period would have started in the forbearance period. They got credit for that, even though they haven't made a payment yet. Well, now they have, but during that period, right? More information can be found on the PSLF page. And then we have the income-driven repayment plan. I got some updates on that. So for those who don't know, you do have to be in an income-driven repayment plan to qualify for PSLF. Just putting it out there. So an IDR plan itself bases your monthly student loan payment based on your income and family size, and that can change. So as many times as that changes in a year, can be the many times you apply for that program in a year. There was a period where I think I applied within 15 months. I applied for, or I reapplied or got my income-driven plan recalibrated 3 times. The first time was when wife was pregnant. This is by TMI. Second one was wife left work for law school, and then third was just pregnant with baby number 2, right? And so all of that changed the calibration of the payment, right? And so it's important to do that, right? So it can count even if you're expecting the baby's not there yet. That can count. So there are 4 different type of repayment plans. There's the Saving on Valuable Education Plan, more on that. Formerly known as the Repay Plan, or the Revised Pay As You Earn, which is the next one, Pay As You Earn, the pay plan. There's the Income-Based Repayment Plan, IBR, and there's the Income Contingent Repayment Plan. So as part of Department of Education's rulemaking, when the SAVE plan came into effect in July 1st, but now is currently on hold. Talk about that in a bit. There's going to be no new enrollments for pay and ICR, right? Those are essentially going to get phased away. The goal of the department was to have just the SAVE plan. But since that's being challenged, we'll see how that goes. Because implementation with SAVE and all these other provisions were all announced together as part of the negotiated rulemaking process. However, if SAVE gets struck down, then there's elements within those rulemaking process that needs to get relooked at, right? Now, for those who don't know, for some individuals in an IDR plan, your payment can be as low as 0, and those payments will count towards forgiveness. Because if you stay long enough, it's not on this slide, but it's on the next slide. If you stay long enough in an IDR plan, you're making qualifying payments, you get the rest of your loans get forgiven. Right? But for PSLF too, this also counts. So if you just started working, right, prior information gets looked at for income, so they can calculate those payments on that. Or maybe you were working, but then you reapply because you took a pay cut or there was a medical emergency, you've had to take time off of work significantly. That's something you can do as well. But again, this is the type of plan you need to be on there for PSLF. So some other fast facts. I remember each year you have to recertify your income and family size. You have probably received already information from your loan servicer about that. I know for me, my deadline was extended in November of 2025, but the deadline for most is coming up. I'm not even too sure why they extended it. They explained it in the letter, but they just said they're extending it until 2025. So I said, great. Still keep the same payment I've been on before the pandemic. But by the end of your repayment period, typically it's 20, 25 years in an IDR plan, any remaining balance that you have that's not paid off is forgiven. And something I want to note that forgiveness under IDR plans are temporarily exempt from federal income taxes through 2025. However, if you receive forgiveness with PSLF, that's always not been considered or counted against you in terms of your federal taxes. However, there could be some state implications for that. In the state of Illinois, they don't consider, well, they follow the federal tax code. So they don't tax or they don't consider whatever amount is forgiven as taxable income. But if you live in a state, because oftentimes we do have individuals that join from other states like Indiana, Michigan, or Wisconsin. If you are living in a state, you want to check with a tax professional if they do consider that taxable, because then you'll have to weigh whether receiving forgiveness is worth it for you to pay that tax bill, right, at that year, right? But one thing to offset, I'm not a tax professional, but one thing to offset is 1 year payment penalty versus how many other years you won't have to make payments in that month, right? So then we also have some updates. So IDR stands for income driven repayment, so it's the acronym. So as a result of recent court actions, there are that have been impacting borrowers. So the deadline to recertify your plans have been extended to November 1 of 2025. Again, mine have been extended to 2025, the same day, November 1. So check to see whether or not yours have. And you often have to check with your loan servicer. Oftentimes they'll do that email that you have a reminder in your or you have a message in your account. You have to log in, look at the account to see that message. But don't ignore those, right? Those are really important. Some of you may have been placed automatically in forbearance because of maybe an area that you lived in was impacted, say by a hurricane. Say if you're living in Florida and you're impacted by Hurricane Milton or what have you, you may have been placed in forbearance. So it's always something to check. Always check to see what your loan servicers are communicating with you. One thing is for sure, they have been much better about communicating information because they've been receiving a ton of pressure by the Department of Education to communicate information over to borrowers. That's what they should have been doing. But you should hear from your loan servicer about those next steps. So they have a timetable where 3 months before, your loan servicer will reach out to you about recertifying your IDR plan. 35 days before your income information is due. Well, you can still submit it after 35 days, but if you want your new statement to reflect a new payment amount, you should do that. Otherwise, if you don't recertify your IDR plan, you get kicked off of it and placed in a standard repayment plan. And while we haven't talked about standard repayment plans at all, essentially what a standard repayment plan is designed to do is to repay your loans back in 10 years. So whatever how much you've borrowed divided by 10, that's going to be the payment amount, right? Which can be astronomical for those who, like me, borrow to earn an advanced degree. Excuse me. 10 days before is the last day you can turn in your income documents. If you miss this deadline, you'll be taken off the IDR plan and placed in a standard repayment plan. So you can, if you're placed in a standard repayment plan, you can still apply anytime to be in an IDR plan. But just know that an instance like what happened to me, I didn't recertify 1 year, and 1 month I was placed in an administrative forbearance for a month, and I had to go back to an IDR plan so they can process everything and make sure everything was okay. And when something like that happens, that 1 month of forbearance won't count towards PSLF. So we talked about SAVE, right? Which is the newest plan that replaces the revised pay-as-you-earn repay. So it is intended to be the most affordable repayment option due to its unique benefits that I want to highlight here. So it offers the lowest repayment option for almost all borrowers compared to all the other IDR plans because they take a smaller portion of your adjusted gross income, your AGI. It also it's if you make, I think this is a great benefit. If you make your full monthly payment that is due, right? Even if you split payment it, right? I know I love doing that with certain bills if they let me do that. But as long as you pay your full amount by the payment due date, your balance doesn't grow, right, with any unpaid interest, right? You may have noticed that, in or if you have a car note or you took out a mortgage for the first few payments, right? It looks like you're barely making any progress because a lot of that is going to interest. What happens with student loans? You can borrow $10,000, but by the time you get into repayment and some of those interest rates were accruing, or some of those loans were accruing with interest, by the time you graduate, maybe it's 14,000. Maybe by the time you start repayment, maybe you go to grad school, it's 16,000, 17,000, right? And even though you're in repayment, if you're in a repayment plan that pays nothing, only interest is accruing. But in a safe plan, if that's your monthly payment, then interest will not count, right? It will not accrue. However, there have been multiple legal challenges made by states to the SAFE plan, which is preventing the Department of Education from implementing this plan. So those who applied or were placed on the SAFE plan, because that was going to be the goal for everybody who was in an IDR plan. So that's all on hold. So you may have been placed in forbearance. And if you don't know, or if you don't know what's going on, right, you've had to have been in repayment already for a year or not, you were in forbearance because repayment started in September of last year. Check. Go to your loan servicer, check to see if you have any messages, see if there's anything from the Department of Education, right? So that you're aware of what's going on, right? Now, if you've been placed in SAVE, right, they're placed in their general forbearance. They're currently reviewing the case right now in the Fifth Circuit Court, or appellate court, I should say, which I think is Southern District of the United States. Anyway, for those who are geeks on that can confirm that. But anytime you're placed on this kind of forbearance, while you're not responsible for making payments at that time you're in forbearance and interest doesn't accrue, it's kind of like a pause. Everything gets paused, right? When you're in that forbearance period, it's not going to count towards forgiveness and it's not going to count towards progress towards you paying back your loan. So it literally is just a pause, right? Kind of if you're playing a game, you press pause, get a sip of water, use the restroom, and come back, right? That's all that's happening here, right? Then we have DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So DACA has been around since 2012. Right now, unfortunately, it's kind of in a position of the same old. At least since the Trump administration took over in 2020. But the executive order, which was started in the Obama administration in 2012, created a 2-year deportation stay for as well as allowed individuals to apply for a work permit and social security number for work purposes. It doesn't create a pathway towards citizenship. We know it can be eliminated at any time. And students with DACA, they are not eligible for federal student aid. In Illinois, we have the alternative application. So if you have a student with DACA, they're more or less likely eligible for alternative applications. So you should point them in that direction. However, they may be interested in an out-of-state school. And if that is the case, then you want to make sure the student is communicating with the school to see what application they need to submit. And if they have to submit a FAFSA, they need to make sure that they submit and select the option under the citizenship status that they are neither a U.S. citizen nor eligible non-citizen. This tells the FAFSA they're not eligible for federal student aid. So an SAI, a student aid index, will not get calculated. So some updates in that. So September 23, and they're also reviewing this currently as well in the Fifth Circuit Court. But in September 23, a federal judge in Texas ruled against DACA. The decision, as I mentioned, repealed. Got it right. With oral arguments that started October 10th, so just almost 2 weeks ago. So those who currently have DACA can continue to renew. So that's kind of why I'm saying same old, same old. The government is not processing first-time applicants. There was a period where we were starting to see a jump when the Biden-Harris administration started in 2021, right? Because one of the first memos that they put out, executive memos, was on DACA. That started opening up, and then these holes started happening, and so they're not processing any new applicants, but those who can renew can continue to renew. Excuse me. And something I want to point out, because of the current rules with DACA, that even if it remains in place, exactly as it is, the number of individuals who will benefit from DACA will continue to decrease over time. And that's because of the requirement that you have had to have entered the U.S. prior to June of 2007 and be under the age of 31. So if you came on June 16th or June 2008, right? You're not eligible for DACA as the way as it currently stands. So even if it's around and people are able to apply for it, right? I know in the past it used to be called DACA youth, but now they're mostly in their early 30s, late 20s. So the chances of someone in working in the high school field, working with somebody with DACA, it's slim to none. Then we have one-time payment count adjustment overview. So in April of 2022, department announced that they would bring borrowers closer to forgiveness by updating payment accounts. They were doing this automatically. And that will have continued through the end of September. And borrowers are going to be eligible for this payment count adjustment regardless of whether they were currently enrolled in an IDR plan or not. So the goal here was because Department of Education looked and so like, well, you have a lot of borrowers who could have received forgiveness by now if they were in an IDR plan. So let's treat them as if they were in an IDR plan, even if they weren't in one. Did they make qualifying number of payments? So they looked at all that, and they've done that all automatically by communicating with your loan servicer, and with that as well. So if you had to consolidate, you had until June 30th to submit a consolidation loan application to qualify for the one-time adjustment because there were some I wouldn't say loopholes, but some flexibilities for those who had loans to consolidate. But most borrowers won't see their updated payment accounts until January. So if come January, February, you still see some information that's not updated, you can always reach out to the Department of Education and they can help guide you with that. And some borrowers, depending if you have to apply for consolidation, just may take a little bit longer. So just do expect those delays. There was also the Fresh Start Initiative. So that ended October 2nd of 2024. This was also announced in 2022. And the goal of this was to bring individuals back into repayment from COVID, that COVID administrative forbearance, but put them in a clean, fresh slate, right? As if they never were in delinquent status. So the Fresh Start automatically gave you access to federal student aid programs, stopped collections, it changed your credit report, it restored ability to rehabilitate your loans. So you have access to that again, as well as access to forbearance and deferment, eligibility for other government loans as well. And for those who are unfamiliar with forbearance and deferment, that's administered by your loan servicer in situations of economic hardships, or if you're in school full time in graduate school, you're placed in deferment. Whether you're even if you're in undergraduate school, right? You're not required to repay back your student loans as long as you're enrolled half time. And then we have our FAFSA updates. So the FAFSA Simplification Act, the final implementation year was 24-25. It was implemented incrementally with the start of the 21-22 FAFSA. With the goal to make applying for financial aid easier and more streamlined. It also reduced the number of questions a student and family will answer. I've seen some families complete both sections of the FAFSA within 15 minutes. Of course, that's if everything is working as it should. But we know with this year, with the beta testing phase, is there to prevent last year. For those who have been involved last year, the fiasco of all the issues surrounding the 24-25 FAFSA release. So for those who are new, the student aid index replaces the expected family contribution. It also amended the federal Pell Grant program. Also allows students who are incarcerated to apply for the Pell Grant. Some other FAFSA changes include that students are now required to answer questions about race and ethnicity, even though that information is not shared with the colleges. Everyone needs to have an FSA ID. In the past, if a parent was undocumented, they would enter zeros on the FAFSA and physically sign a electronic signature page and mail that to the address required on file. But now they need to create an FSA ID, which we know there are hiccups on that, which we'll talk about later on. There's also a parent wizard tool to help students determine which parent needs to be reported on the FAFSA. That's going to be if you're working with students who have parents who are separated or divorced, right? It helps them kind of navigate that piece. It's built into the application. Household size is now referred to as family size, and you can now report up to 20 schools on the online version of the FAFSA and up to 10 schools on the paper version of the FAFSA. Here's some technical updates. Student aid report is now the FAFSA submission summary. The save key has been removed, not saying that you can't save it. But if you can recall last year or 2 years ago going into the FAFSA, as soon as you got in, they asked you for a 4-digit save ID code. So they've removed that. You can still save the application, but they just removed the save key feature. The FAFSA can be available in the 11 most common languages, which is tied into the survey that they do, the consensus survey that they do the census survey. I'm thinking about some work thing of consensus every 10 years. Though the FAFSA is only available in English and Spanish right now, you can access the application in other languages with an interpreter. Haven't seen how that goes, but certainly if you have worked with a student completing FAFSA with an interpreter, please let us know. The IRS data retrieval tool has been replaced with the direct data exchange, the DDX, and the central processing system is now the FAFSA processing system. So we used to use this acronym CPS, not to be confused with Chicago Public Schools. And now it's FPS, FAFSA processing system. Then talk a little bit about the roles of students and parents. So the student is the main contributor. So their answers on the FAFSA will determine if any other additional contributors are required. So if they're considered dependent, then they need their parents, right? Parent wizard tool will tell them, okay, do I need both parents, one parent, right? So each student can invite a contributor. The parent can start the application and invite a student. What we recommend is a student starting the application and then inviting their contributors. But we need everyone to have an FSA ID beforehand. Though not required, highly recommended, because the student will need to enter all that information that matches when they're sending out the contributor invitation link. All that information has to match with their FSA ID with the parents. So if it's already created and matched and they have that information, easy. Or should be easy, I should say. But dependent students will not see a submit button until the parent section is complete. So I mentioned everyone needs an FSA ID. So each contributor, each person basically required to provide information on the FAFSA. And with contributor definitions, when it comes to a parent, right, the same definitions apply. Biological parent, step parent, and adopted parent. All those are considered parent. No other information is required on there. So if you're a student who's in the legal guardianship, they're not considered a parent. Right? So for parents who are married but filed separately or unmarried but parents are still living together, so both parents will need an FSA ID. But if both parents are married and filing jointly, only one parent needs an FSA ID. So if I'm filling out the FAFSA, both my parents filed married jointly, I can have my mom create one, right? Or my dad. No, it wouldn't matter, and it's fine, right? So even if parents who don't have an FSA ID, they also need to create. Parents who don't have a social security number, they also need an FSA ID as well. So if you're creating an FSA ID without an SSN, there's a checkbox that you check that you don't have an SSN. That's simply saying you're not a citizen of the freely associated states, or you're a parent or spouse of a student who's applying for financial aid. When you create your account, you may see identity verification questions. Those have to be answered. Those are developed by TransUnion, right? A third-party vendor that the department uses. You can have some instances in which a student may not see those questions. Usually a set of 3 to 4 questions, sometimes less. But if none appear, that means that TransUnion doesn't have any information on the individual. So if they are not unable to verify their questions through TransUnion, they have to manually complete the verification form. We'll just talk about that, the attestation form. But you will see 2 emails, either or 2 emails, look very similar. But notice in the top red box, if it's checked, that means you're good. Your FSA ID is good to go. And if they see an alert, that exclamation point, that means their FSA ID is not good to go. However, Department of Education has announced back in April of a temporary waiver of this requirement. So if you're a parent, cannot create an FSA ID, or there's an issues with verifying your identity with your FSA ID, you can still use your FSA ID to sign the application, right? But any other functions, you do have to wait until it gets verified. So if you have to verify your information, you have to complete an attestation form. It's available on studentaid.gov. It's emailed automatically if it's identified, should be, if it's identified that that the TransUnion question is going to get verified to the student. And you do need to have a proof of identity, a copy of your ID, whether it's driver's license, state or city ID, or a passport of the foreign country. Excuse me. Any utility bill, if you're using that, has to accompany one of the forms of your ID. This proves your address, whether it's a municipal card, community ID, or consular ID card. And as I mentioned this before, if it's a utility bill, always check for misspellings. I have vivid memory, extensive memory, I should say, of growing up and seeing all of my parents' bills, half of them being misspelled. I've seen Talavera spelled with the P, with the C, instead of a V, it's a UE, right? Just so many different misspellings, right? And that can cause some issues because it's not the same. Everything needs to be the same. So for FSA ID verification without SSN, so the individuals they receive that email, right, or receive the email with the case number. So if they're contacted to reach out to FSA, right, it's 1-800-4FRED, so I have the number on here. And if you're calling, ask for a tier 2 FSA ID specialist so that they can better help you with the verification process. We want to make sure they're submitting the required documentation and the attestation form. And usually within in a regular processing time, you'll receive an update within 7 to 10 business days about your confirmation email that your identification has been verified. Then we have the parent wizard tool, which is designed to help students determine which parent they should report on the FAFSA. So it's working with students whose parents are divorced or separated is going to be a helpful tool in determining which one of those parents they need to submit their information. And keep in mind, if their parents are divorced or separated, it goes to which parent provides the most financial support. And if that is equal, then it's the parent that has the greater income and assets. So when it comes to reporting tax information through the direct data exchange, everyone has to provide consent on the FAFSA. And this is new. It's one of the first things you do in the application. This information is that provides consent. This even applies to non-tax filers. So in the past, if you didn't file taxes, you've had to submit a verification of non-tax filing. That's no longer the case because the IRS will know whether they have a tax return on file or not. It doesn't indicate whether they were required to, it just says whether they have it or not. And if consent is not provided, it's a checkbox. If consent is not provided, then the student aid index will not be calculated. So it's important because if there's no SAI, then there's no eligibility for federal student aid. So that has to be done. You can always go back in if you've revoked consent to provide consent or vice versa. I do have an update too with reporting investment information. So investment questions will not be asked. This is for some individuals who are able to complete the FAFSA so quickly is because of skip logic and because of direct data exchange. So those who make less than $60,000 a year, whether it's parents of dependent students or independent students, or anyone in the household who received means-tested federal benefits in the last previous 24 months, like TANF, WIC, fair reduced lunch, or a student with a negative SAI, they won't see those investment questions, right? There was a small business provision in years prior. That's no longer the case. It's all based off of income, right? Less than $60,000 a year, or all these other ones, then you can receive. You won't be asked your investment questions, such as like investment worth of your business or what you have in your CDs, your bank account, etc. So if you are required to report investments, that you only report the net worth, right? So you take the value of that business minus any debt equals that net worth. You always are excluding the home in which you live in, right? And any child support received is reported in the financial section. And it seems kind of strange, but that's just where they applied that question. As I mentioned earlier about professional judgment, so if you have an instance in which a student is in the gray area of the FAFSA because it's usually black and white, if they're unable to provide parent information, but they're not technically independent student because they couldn't check yes to any one of those boxes, they should seek professional judgment at the school, right? Or if you have a student who both parents were working at the time, but now only one parent is working, they can still request professional judgment because they can reevaluate their financial aid offer. So there are two types of professional judgment: special circumstances and unusual circumstances. So special circumstances, I think about the elements that that look into the cost of attendance. So any of the data elements. Financial aid administrators can't change the formula, but they can change the elements that go into the calculation of the formula. So if you have both families together and made $150,000 in that year, but now they only make $100,000 a year, then they can go in and remove $50,000 worth of income. So that can impact the student's SAI. It will decrease it, increasing the student's financial aid eligibility. For unusual circumstances, I think about those as dependency override. So anything that impacts the dependency status, that's a dependency override. It's an unusual circumstance. So schools can no longer maintain a policy of denying all professional judgment requests. They can still deny them, but they can't say, "Oh, we don't do professional judgment here." They have to have rules and procedures in place and highlight that in the regulations. And they are required to have a list of adequate documentations as well, which can vary across institutions. So what can be acceptable documentation in one institution may not be at another. And I just have some examples, differences between unusual and special circumstances. Unusual circumstance could be you don't have contact with your parents, or parent abandonment or estrangement, and special circumstances like our loss of employment. So really any impacts to the student's calculation of the SAI. So when it comes to being a provisionally independent student, so this is designed for students who believe they may qualify as an independent student based off an unusual circumstance, but they couldn't check yes to any of the dependency questions, right? So what makes this different than in years prior is that the student will be able to submit a FAFSA, a provisional SAI will be calculated, the school will get a flag, oh, we have a provisional SAI, we'll follow up with the student, letting them know we have a provisional SAI, here's our application process for our professional judgment. The student should then communicate with the school to see what's going on. And they still go through professional judgment. Once it's granted, their provisional SAI will change to just a regular SAI. But this will allow the student at least to see that information. In the past, like you still had to wait. Right? You wouldn't get an SAI because FAFSA was like, oh, you're dependent. Because you didn't answer any of the dependency questions, yes to any of them, so you're dependent, but you didn't provide parent information, so no EFC calculation. But now with SAI, you're able to see it. It's provisional. They'll see their eligibility for the Pell Grant. They can at least have an idea already what they'll qualify for. So they won't be required to answer information about their parents. Then we have some new determinations for unaccompanied homeless youth. So the list of people who can provide a determination has been expanded. So this includes homeless district liaison, as usual, a financial aid office from a different school, or from the same prior award year. So that piece is new. Director, a designee of a transitional emergency shelter, street outreach program, homeless youth drop-in center, program serving individuals experiencing homelessness, as well as programs supported by Fertile Trio or a Gear Grant. That piece is also new as well. And lastly, some things institutions can do now, that they can accept documentation of independent student status from another financial aid administrator, or if another institution grants a dependency override, they can take that same status and apply it. We haven't seen that happen too often. We're still seeing institutions require students to go through the verification process or professional judgment process, but they can. That's something the Department of Education has been able to do, has sent reminders for. And what's also new, which I think is very welcoming, is that if a student is deemed independent for financial aid purposes, they're presumed to be independent for the next subsequent award years, right? If they're staying in the same institution, the school may just do a quick follow-up to see if things are still the same, right? And it's important because institutions have resources on campus. They have undocumented student liaisons if a student is undocumented, house liaisons if the student is experiencing homelessness or is homeless, or is at risk of being homeless, I should say, or is in foster care or was in foster care, or benefits navigators to individuals that can help students navigate the benefits program to see what they're eligible for and can apply for. So a couple things to expect for 25-26. So there's going to be no major changes from 24-25, right? I think we've seen most of the major changes, and we're just going to continue to see some soft updates and enhancements as the years go by, which will hopefully continue business as usual, and perhaps in 26-27 go back to October 1. Soon, too early to tell. So the application will fully be available December 1. The FAFSA launched as a beta October 1. And we'll talk a little bit about those beta phase testings. But there is no demo site for the 25-26 application. However, there is a prototype. If you just Google FAFSA prototype, you'll be able to find it. And the attestation form is also moving online. And we also talked about we didn't talk about verification yet, but verification so far is continuing some of those waivers and flexibilities as well. unless the Department of Education makes any changes to that. So about the FAFSA beta test timeline, so they've begun the rollout, and the purpose of this is to test, identify any issues, test the systems. For it allows institutions to also test their systems. Um, Real people are submitting FAFSAs, parents are contributing information, all that stuff. So it's a select group of individuals. So the whole form will be available. The whole FAFSA should be available to students on or by December 1. So a couple things that were happening in October 1. So about 1,000 students were participating in the first phase of beta testing. So during this, institutions were receiving ISACs. They're testing out all this information to make sure things are working as they should. And then for beta phase 2, which had just been completed, only students who received an email confirmation from FSA were notified they'll be part of beta phase 2. And if they did sign up, they're not going to be able to submit if they have any issues with their contributors. They just won't be able to submit until December 1, after the beta phase testing is complete. There's also a designated FSA Federal Student Aid call center for beta testings, and they've had prolonged hours too during those release dates, which were for phase 2, October 15th and 20, and October 18th. So what to expect beyond phase 1 and 2, because it's 4 phases. So phase 3 is expected to start in early November, and beta phase 4 is expected to be in mid-November. We don't have any current details right now, but more details to come. I imagine it's just going to be continuations of phase 1 and 2. Just continue to clean up and patch up the bugs and issues that you see. I do want to share some FAFSA resources in case for those who want to read up on the beta timeline. If they want to sign up and see the financial aid toolkit to see some other webinars and trainings that are interesting to you, as well as any topics with FAFSA simplification or any FAFSA issue alerts as well. All that information is on there. And I think the FAFSA issue alert is a great page to stay up to date on any of the issues and potential workarounds that are there, because we've definitely seen that last year with all of the plates, with the system glitches and so forth. So that does it for the content of the presentation. I'm just going to go over some resources with you all. So our first is our ISAC connection. So you can have your questions answered by a real professional development staff member. If you can sign up by texting 847-250-2384. Text your question to us, right? Registration is easy. We also use this information to send out alerts, maybe reminders that the FAFSA is releasing, if they have any issues with something, right? We use this to communicate information out to you as well. I like to think about this as like a mini message. Then we have our College Access Symposium. So we have 4 scheduled for this year. Our first one was last week at Southern Illinois University, so we were down in Carbondale. Next Tuesday, we're going to be at Lincoln Land Community College. Following Wednesday, we'll be at Moraine Valley, and then the following Friday, we're going to be at Sauk Valley Community College. So a few things to note on here is that registration is open for Moraine Valley and Sauk Valley, but with Lincoln Land, there's currently a wait list. So if you're interested, reach out to us, and we'll see if we can get you into the event. The cost to register is $25. But essentially, with College Access Symposium, we are combining our FAFSA Symposium and PACE Symposiums together. So you can have great speakers and learn about how high schools and organizations are supporting students to become ready for life after high school. Then we have our FAFSA communication toolkit. So we have free resources where you can use and download to put flyers and other information together to get the word out about the event. Then we have our First Generation Scholars Network. So it's an initiative that we've had for a few years now at ISAC, where we connect first generation students who are first in the family to go to college with a mentor and other resources on campus. We have different events that we host as well. Services are here provided at no cost to the student or to anyone who joins. Some of you may have joined our First Gen Symposium last year. And some other ISAC initiatives and resources, especially those over the summer, was our ECMC efforts in FAFSA completion and helping students who recently graduated last May and June getting them back in to complete a FAFSA. So we were able to get many more FAFSAs completed. We had $1 million awarded by the federal government to spend, and we got very, very close to that. So great news, right? We're also in the midst of our College Changes Everything campaign, soon to be fully launched, especially when the FAFSA gets launched. But you can be a CCE site if you agree to host. There's an outreach request form that you complete. It's on here, but you just have to agree to host one FAFSA completion or financial aid application completion workshop and one college application workshop, and you'll get a ton of information. You'll get CCE shirts like the one I have on right now. Um, and that doesn't work, then you can also reach out to an ISAC core member using a bookings link and meet with the core member virtually, right? And they can talk you through that. So for those who are seeking CE and PD hours, so an evaluation does have to be completed by Thursday, October 24, 2024. So my colleague will open up the chat and share this with you all. But to access it, so you do have to complete the evaluation. Just make sure you get that evaluation completed by October 1. Um, let me let me just make sure it gets updated. So just bear with me for a moment with that. But lastly, thank you all. Thank you. I see it. Thank you, Dara. So see that on there. So that link will be on there for a few minutes. So you don't have to complete it now. Just copy and paste it, put it onto your browser, copy and paste it in a Word document, right? But as soon as the 24th hit, it will close. It will automatically get those sent over to you. But if you have any questions, reach out to us at isac.outreachtraining@illinois.gov. You can also sign up for our e-messaging system where you can receive the latest updates and news about updates on our programs, payment reminders, etc. if you're from the institution. But thank you all. That's all the contact information I have. If there are any remaining questions on here, we'll be sure to get those answered. But thank you all. Have a good rest of your day and look forward to seeing you at one of our events. Thank you.
I'm seeing that some people are saying that it states that they have already taken the survey. Just stick with me a moment. Let me see if there's something in the settings that I can change. So just stay on for just a few minutes.
But the recording is still going. I'm not sure if you can shut that off.